Hello YouTube, welcome to the very first episode of Telling Stories. Today we're going to look at the 5 elements that I think make for a terrific narrative and the index that I use when I'm evaluating books, movies, and TV shows. I'm Andrew Crabtree, and this is Telling Stories. And we're back. Thanks guys for watching my very first episode of Telling Stories. Maybe when this channel blows up, people will actually go back and watch this one. Today, we're going to look at the 5 elements that I think make for a terrific narrative and how that can impact books, movies, and TV shows. Now, I'm planning on reviewing all of those different things this year on this YouTube channel, so anything with a story is something that I want to dig into, and I think that these elements are universal across all different mediums of storytelling. So without further ado, let's look at element number 1, characters. To me, characters are the most important part of a story, and they're literally what pushes the plot through. So without good characters, it's really hard to care about the plot of a story. Characters get broken up into a couple different groups that are really important. First, you have your protagonist. Second, you have your villain or antagonist. And third, you have your supporting or secondary characters. There's a lot of reasons that people really love Harry Potter, but to me, it starts with the characters. First, you have a protagonist that people love to care for in Harry. Also has a despicable villain that people love to hate in Voldemort that's fully developed character with a backstory that you actually almost sympathize for. But Harry Potter also has brilliant secondary characters that really help move the story along in a humorous and entertaining way. From Ron to Hermione to Dumbledore to Ginny to Fred to George to Snape to Neville to Seamus to Luna. You get the picture. All of that breaks down to say that you have to be able to identify with characters, that you have to want to see the protagonist succeed over evil, and that protagonist is developed enough that you can see yourself in his shoes. Now that brings us to element number 2 of a great story, the plot. I think we all remember back to grade school when we would look at a typical story arc. We would look at our rising action, exposition to our climax, the pivotal moment of the story, and then our falling action and our resolution. Now, that primitive story arc is still relevant today, albeit with some caveats, but the most important things that we're looking at with a plot are: what is the problem that faces our protagonist? Is the conflict significant enough for us to feel invested? And how is that conflict resolved? And does it make sense how it's resolved? Now, a plot doesn't always have to be crazy detailed or elaborate. There doesn't have to be some big aha moment. Now, sometimes that can help, and that's a good device to help tell a story, but as long as we've got great characters that we cared about, coupled with some problem to overcome, that's good enough to lead the story through for us to want to see that resolution and to keep turning the page or to keep watching to see what happens. With element number 3, we're looking at something a little different: cultural relevancy. As we're experiencing a story and experiencing characters, another way that it helps us emotionally tie it to ourselves is being able to see something in our own society and our own culture that we can relate it to. I think that this connection to culture often goes overlooked, but it's significant, and it's all throughout literature and modern TV shows and movies. I think it's so significant that I value it just as much as any other element, and I think that it's one of the most significant ways that we can make an emotional connection into a story. Our 4th element of a great story is entertainment value. This element probably needs the least amount of explanation. Entertainment value to me is simply what keeps me turning the pages, or what keeps me glued to the TV, what makes me binge watch Stranger Things. A few different things that contribute to a story's entertainment value can be humor, sentiment, nostalgia, and even romance. Is Bella gonna choose Edward or Jacob? I have to know! Entertainment value, easy. Page turner, binge watcher. The 5th element that I think contributes to a dynamically told, well-rounded story is setting. So some people will call this setting, some people will call this world building, especially if it's a sci-fi or a fantasy work. But basically, how does the environment that our protagonist exists in contribute to the story? Is the setting well presented and described, especially in a book? Like, can we actually see ourselves existing in the protagonist's universe? Some people would say that works of film, like a TV show or movie, would be at an advantage here because of the camera's ability to capture the setting. But I would actually argue otherwise. I think in film it's easy to take for granted that the audience sees the surroundings and leads you to do little actual world building and development that we actually connect to. Regardless, the setting or world building, do we fully understand our surroundings? Do we fully understand how the character engages them? And what effect does that setting have on the plot? Now guys, as I start to build this channel out and actually start reviewing books, movies, and TV shows, I'm going to use those 5 elements to represent a metric that I'm going to use to analyze each one of these works. We're going to call it the Almost Arbitrary Point Index, or the AAPI. So the AAPI takes these 5 elements that we just looked at and assigns 10 points per element for a total possible score of 50. And that's what we'll use as our metric to review all of these stories that we look at throughout the year. We'll use those 50 points to then give us a letter grade for each story we review. 45 or more out of 50 is an A. 40 to 45 is a B. You get the point. Every 5 points knocked off is a letter grade. So that's it, guys. That wraps up our episode. Thanks so much for watching. If you liked anything that you saw here today, literally anything, make sure to hit that subscribe button and tune in next week, as I'm really excited. We'll be reviewing our very first book. We're taking a look at Ernest Cline's classic Ready Player One, one of my very favorite stories of all time. So see you then. I'm Andrew Crabtree, and this has been Telling Stories.